Ian is in Marylebone. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First-time caller, so please be kind.
Of course I will.
I think, basically, the problem we've got is it's easier to believe the lie and go along with Boris's rhetoric than it is to actually admit the scary truth. From personal experience, when the referendum came round, I was on the fence, if I'm honest.
Yes.
And I come from a Labour voting family. Father was a shop steward at Vauxhall years ago.
Yeah.
As time's moved on, as I've grown up, I've become slightly more conservative in that sense. But when the referendum came around, I actually did think if we can get a better deal, a better situation than we're currently in, it's worth giving it a go.
Well, of course it would be.
Now, alongside that, I'm married to an Irish lady, and I think anyone will admit the benefits and the actual workings of the EU are understood a lot better by people outside of the UK.
Yes.
I'm 43. I've had, call it 30 years of newspapers telling me that the bananas are too bendy or something or other, and Brussels is enforcing this, Brussels is enforcing that. So I do think, going back to your first point, I think the media has an awful lot of questions to be answered in terms of how we as a population think of things.
Yeah, but the media can't even ask the questions because we already know the answers. They're not going to turn around and destroy their own business model by saying, not only did we lie to you for 30 years, but our lies created an environment in which we could do untold damage to the country and persuade you to vote against your own obvious interests. That's just not going to happen.
And one of the other sort of turning points, if you like, that happened with me was a friend of mine he was banging on about the 1% for a long time, and he was doing my head in. I thought, what are you on about with this 1%? Oh, they control everything. So, no, they can't. They can't. And the more you look into things, and fact-based arguments can be had rather than emotional, it scared the life out of me, James. I realised at that point, I'm not talking like an epiphany, but I realised at that point that it is so easy to manipulate an audience that you fall in line without even knowing you're falling in line. Like,
and is it
the bendy bananas were too much for me.
But no one really. I mean, it's more than a bendy banana, isn't it? And
it's 30 or 40 years of
but what chipping away, but also not just the funny stuff, not just the, we used to laugh. Probably we didn't laugh loud enough at people saying they wanted to leave the European Union because of hairdryers or Hoovers.
Yeah, your 3-pin plugs, etc.
But the fear of this undefined enemy that wishes us harm. I increasingly think that was the real problem that we missed, is that even people who were, because I was like you, I was relatively ambivalent. I'd never met a passionate supporter of the European Union who was from these islands in my life. I've met a few since, but they weren't prior to 2016. They certainly weren't on the public stage.
And now we're all political experts.
Well, yeah, we're either experts or at least we know more than we did before. But the people who know more than we did before and went the other way, the effort now that's being put into keeping those eyes shut and those ears blocked is unbelievable, and that's where you get shocked.
I wouldn't go as far as to say my heart bleeds for these people, but
mine does.
I don't know.
I'm getting gypped for that now, because that line of mine about compassion for the con, contempt for the con men, compassion for the con. A lot of people are suggesting that's not helpful anymore, because there has to come a point where the con become part of the con. But the alternative is to turn around and say, oh, crikey, we got this wrong. And on a day where the alternative to not saying, oh, crikey, we got this wrong, is nodding along with the Prime Minister, insulting the memory of a murdered MP, that's the day that people like Ian and me and many of you realise that probably things have already gone too far. And that's why I float the very uncomfortable question of whether or not this is deliberate. We haven't got another theory yet.